Christmas had always been a time of joy and togetherness for our family, and this year was no different, except for the location. My sister had discovered a charming, rustic cabin deep in the woods, far from the noise of the city. It had belonged to a distant relative, someone none of us remembered well, but the family connection made it feel like the perfect place to celebrate the holiday. We arrived on Christmas Eve, bundled in scarves and hats, our laughter echoing through the frozen forest as we unloaded the car. The cabin was just as picturesque as the photos suggested, a cozy wooden structure surrounded by towering pines, their branches heavy with snow. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something older, harder to place. As the evening wore on, the festive atmosphere grew warmer. The tree was decorated with twinkling lights and family heirloom ornaments. The fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. We sang carols and sipped hot chocolate, the perfect holiday scene. But even in that warmth, there was an undercurrent of unease. The forest outside seemed darker than it should have been, the trees standing like silent sentinels. When the wind howled, it sounded almost alive, carrying faint whispers that none of us could quite make out. After midnight, as the celebration quieted, my sister and her husband retreated to their room, while I stayed up a little longer. I wanted to soak in the peace of the night, the kind of stillness that only exists in places far removed from the chaos of everyday life. Sitting by the window, I gazed at the snow-covered trees illuminated by the faint moonlight. The only sound was the occasional creak of the cabin's old wooden beams, a comforting rhythm that made me feel oddly at home. But then, just as I began to nod off, something broke the silence, a faint tapping at the window. It was soft at first, almost gentle, like the brush of a tree branch against the glass. My heart skipped, and I forced myself to look. Nothing. Shaking off the moment of unease, I turned back to the fire, telling myself it was just the wind or my imagination playing tricks on me. But no sooner had I sat down than it came again, louder this time, an unmistakable knock. This time, I couldn't ignore it. Grabbing a flashlight, I opened the front door, peering into the frosty darkness. The wind bit at my face, and the snow crunched beneath my boots. There were no footprints, no sign of anyone, or anything, around. I was about to step back inside when I noticed something in the snow near the edge of the trees, a small, carved wooden figure, roughly the size of my hand. It looked like a person, hunched over, with an expression that was almost sorrowful. I picked it up hesitantly, brushing off the snow. Its surface was smooth and worn, as if it had been held many times before. But who would leave something like this here, in the middle of nowhere? I brought it inside, locking the door behind me. The firelight flickered over the figure's surface, and for a moment, it seemed almost alive. A trick of the light, I told myself. As I set the wooden figure on the mantel above the fireplace, a strange heaviness filled the room. It wasn't anything I could explain, just an oppressive feeling, as though the air had grown thicker. I tried to brush it off, returning to the couch with a blanket and a mug of hot chocolate. The warmth of the fire helped to calm me, but my mind kept drifting back to the figure. Why had it been left there? And why now, on Christmas Eve? Moments later, I heard it again, the knock. This time, it was unmistakable and came from the back door. My pulse quickened. We had checked the locks earlier, no one should be able to approach the house without leaving tracks in the snow. Gripping the flashlight tightly, I made my way through the darkened cabin, the floor creaking under my steps. Reaching the back door, I paused, listening. The knock came again, soft, deliberate, as if someone wanted to be let in but didn't want to alarm me. Against every instinct screaming at me to ignore it, I pulled the curtain aside and peered out into the night. Nothing. Just snow and shadows. I opened the door cautiously, expecting the icy wind to rush in, but the air was still. Too still. My flashlight beam swept over the ground, searching for footprints, but there weren't any. Just another carved figure, lying on the threshold. This one was different. It depicted a figure with its hands covering its face, as if weeping. My stomach churned as I picked it up. The wood was warm to the touch, almost unnaturally so. Slamming the door shut, I locked it and backed away, clutching the new figure tightly. My heart raced as I returned to the living room. Placing the second figure next to the first on the mantel, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Then, the power went out. The sudden darkness swallowed the room, leaving only the faint orange glow of the dying embers in the fireplace. My breath hitched as the silence pressed down on me, broken only by the distant sound of the wind outside. I scrambled to find my phone, using its flashlight to guide me back to the living room. The figures on the mantel now looked more sinister in the flickering light, their shadows stretching and twisting across the walls. As I tried to gather my thoughts, I heard something, a faint creaking sound coming from upstairs. My chest tightened. The cabin had been empty when I arrived, and no one else should have been there. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. Each step on the wooden staircase felt like a betrayal, the creaks loud and unforgiving. When I reached the landing, I could see the hallway stretched out before me, cloaked in shadows. At the end of the hall, one of the bedroom doors was slightly ajar. A soft light flickered from inside, casting an eerie glow on the walls. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the light was coming from a single candle on the nightstand. The room was otherwise empty, but something about it felt wrong. The air was colder here, and the faint scent of pine needles mixed with something metallic lingered. On the bed was another carved figure. This one was larger than the others, depicting a family gathered around a Christmas tree. But their faces were carved with disturbing precision, twisted expressions of fear and anguish. As I reached out to touch it, the candle suddenly extinguished, plunging the room into complete darkness. My phone's flashlight flickered, and I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a low, guttural whisper, like several voices speaking at once. I bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind me. My instincts screamed to leave the cabin, but when I reached the front door, I froze. The first two figures on the mantel were now on the floor, placed side by side near the door. A third figure had appeared on the mantel in their place, a figure that looked eerily like me, standing in the very doorway I was now frozen in. I stared at the figure on the mantel, my heart pounding in my chest. The resemblance was uncanny, same jacket, same stance, even the same expression of fear frozen in its tiny wooden face. My breath quickened as I felt the overwhelming sensation of being watched. I backed away from the door, unable to tear my eyes away from the carvings. A sound broke the silence, a soft, melodic humming, coming from behind me. It was faint at first but grew louder with each passing second. I spun around, shining my flashlight into the living room. The chair by the fireplace, the one that had been empty moments ago, was now rocking gently back and forth. But no one was sitting in it. The humming grew louder, now accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps, circling me, though no one was there. I could feel the hair on my arms stand on end as the temperature in the room plummeted. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. The rocking chair stopped abruptly, the silence pressing in like a weight. Then, a soft thud echoed from the mantel. I turned back to see another figure had joined the one resembling me. This one was smaller, carved with disturbing detail, a child clutching a broken toy, tears carved into its wooden cheeks. Panic surged through me. I bolted toward the front door, desperate to escape, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt as though an unseen force was holding it shut. Behind me, the faint whispering started again. It grew louder, more urgent, and the voices began to form words, though they overlapped in an incomprehensible cacophony. "Get out." I didn't need to be told twice. I ran toward the back of the cabin, finding a door that led to the snow-covered yard. This one opened easily, and I stumbled outside into the freezing night air. The wind howled around me, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter, children's laughter, high-pitched and chilling. I turned back toward the cabin, its dark windows staring back at me like empty eyes. And then I saw it. In the largest window, a faint glow illuminated the interior. The rocking chair was moving again, and in it sat a shadowy figure, its head tilted in my direction. Clutched in its hands was the wooden figure of me. I never went back to that cabin. The next morning, I called the rental company and canceled my reservation without explanation. They didn't seem surprised. Months later, I couldn't resist the urge to search for the property online. I found an old article detailing its dark past. A family had lived there decades ago, a father, mother, and their young son. The father, driven mad by isolation during a harsh winter, had taken their lives on Christmas Eve before taking his own. Locals claimed their spirits lingered, repeating the same tragic night over and over, searching for someone to join them in their eternal torment. To this day, I can't bring myself to celebrate Christmas. The sound of humming, the sight of carved wooden figures, even the faintest creak of a rocking chair sends a chill down my spine. Because sometimes, late at night, I still feel like I'm being watched. If this story gave you the chills, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for more terrifying tales like this. And tell me, have you ever experienced something inexplicable? Share in the comments.